There is a famous phrase from Jesus saying that forgive them for they do not know what they are doing. I pondered about it and I wanted to practice for the sake of compassionate sense that I should generate for myself, but wasn't so successful, I have to admit. There are cases that something happened, but the way to go over is to let go. So obviously, such word as Christ mentioned, so to speak, is to the point that you let go and move on. Since it didn't work, well, I look at the sentence again and realize that I have to practice forgive me for I do not know what I'm doing. So it's a compassion for myself. Among other things I've been working on, Myokonin, Shin Buddhism, people like Saichi, Shoma, Genza, laymen could digest and practice the idea of compassion beyond my belief. Often they're laymen, many of them couldn't even write. But they felt the sense of suffering, and the Shin Buddhism offered the approach similar to Christianity. Instead of God, they talk about Amida Buddha, representing compassion. So the concept and the teaching is very simple. Originated from India, but over time through China and to Japan. And the teaching shifted to the point that Shinran is the most famous, following Honen, another monk, to practice this idea of Shin Buddhism. And famous saying there is that, I have to translate from Japanese to English, without getting rid of delusion, you can attain nirvana. And that is practiced by the Myokoni, the group of Shin Buddhism, who are known to be attained such a state that they could be so compassionate for themselves and for others. What did they do? They followed the idea that they are sinful, cause trouble for themselves and others. So they prayed or devoted themselves for Amida Buddha to take over. By the idea of Nembutsu, they call it Namu Amidabutsu, which represent I take refuge in Amida Buddha. And by praying for that, in essence, they get rid of themselves and for Amida to come into their whole being by saying Namu Amidabutsu. And I have posted various videos representing what the transformation was like and how they expressed the sense of being with Amida in nirvana, blissful sensation, be happy. So I went through Vipassana and Zen, and I realized myself I was more into wisdom, but less on compassion. So I started to bridge the gap from Zen to Shin Buddhism. And for that, I posted various videos already about how I have sort of transformed and experienced this blissful sensation. What's so interesting is that the sense of compassion was already discussed in Vipassana. And I took many courses, more than a dozen of them, 10-day course. And on the 10th day, before they finished the whole course, Goenkaji would talk about Metta and chant the idea of Metta. And by that time, going through 9 days or so of meditation every day, 11, 12 hours, my mind was clear, quiet, equanimous, and be aware of what's going on to the deeper level, or even, I want to say, deepest level of my being, so that the unconscious part becomes more conscious. That you're connecting not just in the superficial level of the mind, but deeper into my being. And with that being done, the chanting of the metta penetrate through into my whole body. And the sensation I have then is called the Dhamma piti. The piti is pleasure or happiness. Dhamma is the law. So there's a blissful sensation of me identified. There's no me. There's no self. It's just a phenomena. But for the sake of discussion, I say me identified with the metta, compassion, so deeply so that my whole being is vibrating. If we have gone through Vipassana, we may have had the similar or pretty much the same experience. And that happened every time I go to Vipassana course of 10 days. At the 10th day, I listen to it, and then we go back to the world with a sense of compassion, as much as wisdom that we cultivate throughout that 10-day course. But the metta doesn't happen only last day in the morning, because earlier on we have lots of miseries or the sufferings and but habitual patterns that may not connect to the sense of compassion or metta. So the sequence of event of 10 days lead to go deeper into yourself and find who you are, so to speak. And by having better developed awareness and equanimity, you're ready to practice metta and go back to the world. So what I realized by listening to metta, which I am sharing here, because it's so powerful and may not be so interesting for those who hasn't attended the Vipassana, but whoever may have attended Goenkaji's course would have this sensation, possibly. And that's exactly the word I use, Dhamma piti, the pleasure of the blissful sensation of following the Dhamma, or the law, or law of nature. It's exactly the same blissful sensation I have with Shin Buddhism, as much as Myokonin is also exemplifying that they have such a pleasure, happiness, and talk about, for example, Saichi. I mentioned that he goes in and out of that blissful nirvana. I've already mentioned that what that is from the point of view of neuroscientist Gilbert Taylor, who got the stroke and felt that nirvana sensation because there was no mind. As if she went back to the Garden of Eden, she could connect to the source, be aware of what's actually happening, not disturbed because of the bad habit or habitual pattern developed, that you have now a straight connection to the root of who you are. So I have gone through Vipassana, Zen, did Koan, and continued my meditation since 2000 with Vipassana. And by going through this sin and the compassion that I thought I was missing, I could come to the point that forgiving myself for I don't know what I was doing. And what that would do to me, or being done in my view, is that because of that sensation and the strong sense that it comes with me, even multiple times a day, that I have this Dhammapiti or blissful sense, or sense of nirvana, if I may call it, as much as Saichi called that, in and out. You don't necessarily get rid of the delusion, but you have a way to process it. And by being able to be compassionate to myself, to realize what it is, the transformation and the meaning of compassion related to Amida Buddha or the law of nature, as Goenka talked about the law of nature helping to create the connection to the root of who we are in his one of the speech that is shared in the Vipassana course. So it's just a brief statement that he shared, but the same notion of root and following the law of nature, or the law of the universe, I call it, bring out the sense of getting rid of this delusional thought and be compassionate to others as well as to myself, to ourselves. And that view coming from Vipassana or Zen and Shin Buddhism had the same notion, as much as I shared Meister Eckhart talking about the similarity of Myokonin Shin Buddhism to what he did in his sermon in one of those videos I shared recently on the YouTube. So there are various references that may be confusing, but if I can summarize or picture the situation, at the core, if we connect to the root of who we are, it's like an awareness, awakening of unconscious part that we didn't know or covered by the filters and habitual pattern can be transformed by us to be aware of what's going on, to have the compassionate sense to ourselves as to others, and bring out the wisdom to go with it. My journey has been long, but going through these events and experiences, at this age I'm still a student, learning, and be happy to be associated with such teaching and the way. Actually, it's not so much about teaching because it's just the way of nature. It's already there, but the teaching helps to work on our mind and habitual pattern so that we can connect to the root of who we are, to understand whether it's Shin, Buddhism, or Zen, or Christianity, for all beings to be happy, we have the same construct of who we are, what the root may be, and how we may be able to access to that. For us to be compassionate to ourselves and compassionate to others, and bring out the wisdom to live happily. It sounds like I'm preaching. That's not the intention of it. The intention was just reflecting of where I have been and where I am now, and the passage I'm taking to keep on practicing, and even connecting to the root and sensing this blissful sensation as if I'm aligning my will, my approach, the way to the way of the universe that all of us may have as the same human being. Thank you.